Hello, will you start by telling us, introducing yourself, telling us your name and what program you're studying in?
Yeah. My name is Jessica Acalis, and I'm a first-year master's student in the speech-language pathology program, the intercampus one.
So tell us about your undergraduate program and how you selected a major and what that coursework was like.
So I started at KU for my undergrad, and I started as an elementary education major, and then I took a linguistics class, and I was like, oh, I didn't know about speech pathology, so I switched halfway into my sophomore year, and after I got into the speech pathology things, um, there was a lot of like foundational classes about the sciences behind communication, like hearing science and speech science and everything. And then also during my undergrad, I did a practicum in the Schiefelbusch speech clinic, and that was really helpful for especially coming into my grad program because it gave me hands-on experience and kind of like you actually start to understand what it is versus just like hearing about it. So
And what was it that drew you to speech pathology?
um I always knew that I wanted to work with um people, specifically children, because I wanted to be a teacher for forever. But then I think finding out a different way to take those skills of like working with kids and building rapport and all of that, um, and making it more specific to, well, for me, it's more kids like with special needs and that kind of situation. So um, I think being able to specifically hone into kids who need that little extra help was encouraging for me. And also another thing with speech pathology is it's a very like broad career path. There's a ton of things you can do with it in different settings and ages and different populations. So I think that's also nice because I know with teaching you hear about burnout a lot, and same with like speech pathology in certain fields, but there's always like something different you can try.
So let's talk about your curriculum in your undergraduate career. What did that look like? What did a typical semester look like for you?
For me, I kind of did it a little differently because I was a go-getter, I guess, and I packed it all into I graduated in 3 years instead of 4 because I just planned my schedule that way on accident. But I took the beginning level courses my sophomore year because I switched into the major. Um, but you take, um, let's think, there's like the ones where you're learning the basic foundations behind it, and then you kind of move up into the 500 and 600 level classes your junior and senior year. And those ones are like the communicating brain and the language development and kind of the more like specific content classes for what you're going to actually be using more often in the field. And then also a lot of people in their junior and senior year do like research and then the practicum experiences like I was talking about earlier. So it kind of like steps you further and further into like what real life will be like.
And so you chose to take a gap year. So can you walk us through your decision to do that and what you found to be the benefits and or the challenges of that?
Yeah, so there were a few things of that got me to my gap year. The first thing I think was because I did do a lot during undergrad between school and work and just putting a lot of pressure on myself. I think that I kind of needed that mental break of before I stepped into 2 more harder years of it, of just taking a little time for myself, which I don't usually do. So it was kind of a big decision. But then also um, financially, I wanted to save up some more money to help pay for grad school and get me set for it, because I've learned this year in my first year of the program, it was really hard to like fit work into, because I work at a daycare, so it's like typical Monday through Friday, which is also what the clinic hours are. So it was interesting fitting a job into that. So part of it was finances, and then um, also experience. I um, wasn't, in hindsight, I could have done it without that little extra, but I wanted more experience. And with that, planning my gap year, I had a few different plans for it, but I was either going to go work in Wichita at Heart Spring, which is a school that a lot of kids with autism go to, and some of them live there and all that. So I was going to be like an aide there. And then also I ended up being a preschool teacher at Hilltop. So that was good because it gave me that experience of working with kids they were 2 to 3, so they were developing their language, which is like exactly what I needed. So I think between finances, a mental break, and then getting more experience, the gap year was a good thing. And then some of the negatives to it would be coming back into school a year later was kind of like, oh, gotta get back in things and remember how to do it. And I was just a little rusty, but there was other people in my program who also had a gap year and were feeling the same thing as me. So it was nice to go through it with them. But yeah, and then just getting back in the mindset of like, oh yeah, I'm in school. I'm not working right now. Like just getting back to a new normal, I think was interesting.
Can you tell us a little bit about the application process?
Yeah. So applying, I only applied to KU. A lot of people apply to multiple schools. I started the application for Wichita State, and then like last minute, I was like, I don't want to spend this much money if I know I want to go to KU. So I kind of just put all my fish in one barrel. But so you write a personal statement, which I think the prompt is different every year, but I think ours was just like, what's one thing that sets you apart from the other candidates? So like a personal statement, and then you get your 3 references. And I used, I think, an employer, and then I used 2 of my professors from undergrad. And then what else is there? Oh, the GRE. That was another reason for my gap year also, by the way. But the GRE, they don't use it anymore as of this year, but last year when I was getting accepted, they still looked at it, but that's just like the general placement exam that a bunch of people take, and it's kind of scary, but it's not as awful as everyone says. But so between the GRE, personal statement, and the letters of reference, and then there's like a general application, I think, too. But then also your resume is another big thing.
How did you decide what faculty to use for letters or recommendations? What was your strategy behind that?
I used someone who had me for multiple classes, and I used Naveen because he had me when I very first started the program, and then when I was my last class in the program, so he kind of saw me as a little person who didn't know anything, and then I grew up, and then he saw me again. So I thought that was a good one. And then the other teacher I used because I had her for multiple classes, and I felt more of a personal closeness with her, I guess. They are my 2 teachers that I actually connected with the most. In hindsight, I could have used my mentor or my faculty who was my supervisor for clinic, but I didn't think about it at the time just because everything else was going on. But that would have been also helpful, as using someone who was like my supervisor and knew my like work ethics and all of that.
Let's talk about the transition into grad school. You said it was a little bit challenging because you were a little bit rusty, but how have you noticed a difference between how you have to prepare for classes and studying, and just the differences in workload?
Mm-hmm. Lots of reading. There's lots of research articles, and it's kind of more, to me at least, here are the tools that you need to learn, now go use them. So it's hard to adjust to at first, but after you get used to it, you're capable of it. So it's just kind of getting used to it at first. But I think kind of teaching yourself, but like with guidance for it depends on what it is too. But because a lot of the things are, for example, like assessments, you kind of have to read through the manual till you get it. You can't really just listen about it. So it's a lot of stuff that you have to do in order to understand. I think balancing your time is kind of a tricky thing to get used to at first because, for example, in my clinical experience, I always put clinic first because I think of it as real people, whereas like class is just, I can do the reading later if I need to. But that was something that I personally struggled with, is I always wanted to do stuff for clinic, and then I was like, oh, I've done enough for that, I have to do my class too. But And that's just part of like my own personal work ethic and all of that. But another thing would be balancing how much time to spend, for example, like on a reading, because some of those readings are like 40 pages long. So if I have 4 of those to read, then like what parts of this paper are going to be the most important and give me the like information that I need. So being able to like analyze and think about why you're going through that kind of stuff.
What is your favorite part of the program?
Definitely the clinical experience and actually getting to interact with clients and work with people, which has been
So,
weird lately.
what does a clinical experience, walk us through what that looks like?
Um, so in the fall, you do it for the speech pathology program, you do it in the Lawrence campus one semester and then at the medical center in Kansas City the other semester. But I was on a team that worked with adults who have intellectual disabilities. And so I had one client and he was in 2 group settings for therapy, um, and then I also did assessments. And so I knew people would come to the clinic and I would help fit them with AAC devices and do speech and language assessments with them. But it depends on what team you're on. There's different groups that work with different populations for what kind of experience you'll get. But you get clients that you see weekly and you get to work with them and see their progress, which is good. And then at the medical center at KUMC, it's similar but different because there's more variety in the placements and there's a lot more adults there. For example, there's like an aphasia group and then like an ALS clinic and Parkinson's, and there's just quite the variety of groups. So, and it's a different setting. It's more of like the medical setting than clinic.
Okay, so tell us, what are your ultimate career goals and your plans?
Um, I'm still kind of torn between if I want to work with children or adults or both, but I want to work with, let's see, I think I want to work with kids who use AAC devices or kids in early intervention in general. Hopefully my field study experience in the spring will help me decide that for sure, but I think I want to work for a nonprofit agency also. And then I also am interested in like working with adults who have aphasia and difficulty with language because of like strokes or TBIs and things like that. So I'm kind of on both ends of the spectrum and I don't know which side I'm leaning towards, but I think with more experience, it'll help me figure it out. But I'm thinking early intervention with kids is probably my calling.
So what advice would you have for students who are still exploring the different healthcare routes?
I think that it's good that, well, exploring and being open for exploring is good, I think, because it is such an interdisciplinary field. Like, for example, as speech pathologists, we work with the audiologist and OT and PT, and everyone kind of teams together. So I think that's whatever experience you have from exploring around, it'll help either way, and it'll help you be a better team member. So.
And then the last question is, what advice do you have for somebody who's getting ready to apply to a program?
I would say I would focus more on the experiences that you have and draw on those rather than like grades and test scores, because those are the things that help you later on. For example, I did clinic in undergrad and I also did the communication camp that the Schuffelbusch Clinic runs, and like those 2 things were kind of my most hands-on experiences, and I think that's like what helped me kind of get picked rather than some other people who don't have those kinds of things. So just getting as much experience as you can and kind of pointing out the strengths of those types of things and highlighting those to make sure that it's known.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks.